It says that she is a gaunt, black-haired glamour ghoul who comes out through ominous...
You're still afraid.
Stop it now, I mean it.
And she hates... You know how people exaggerate. She
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
She goes this with...
Stop it. You're
Barbara?
Come on, it's time for the Ghost Hollywood.
Welcome to another episode of the Ghost of Hollywood right here on KBOO 90.7 FM Portland. I'm your host, Poxy Leonard, here with Miss Ragan, and tonight we have all kinds of cinematic chaos to serve up on the airwaves as we creep through the early morning hours.
That's right, Poxy. I'm actually really excited about tonight's episode because we get to discuss what is probably one of the most perplexing films to see the screen in the 1980s, and that is no other than the Martin Scorsese 1983 black comedy, The King of Comedy, starring Sandra Bernhard, Robert De Niro, and Jerry Lewis. And I must admit, just having featured Sunset Boulevard in the last episode, I think we've accidentally developed a theme here with delusional lead characters.
You know, that's a good point. But really quick before we get things started, who do you think was the better lunatic, Norma Desmond or Rupert Pupkin?
Norma Desmond definitely carried a little more volatility than Pupkin, but I think we're dealing with different types of delusion here though, because Desmond was a has-been and Pupkin just never was at all. I mean, I think King of Comedy crawls up into your mind a little bit more quickly because we've all fallen victim of delusions of grandeur before, but we also get an idea of what it's like to be on the other side of fame.
Well, they're definitely both desperate for success, but Bernhard's character Masha really reinforces the idea of what it is to be an obsessive fan, which backs up your saying that the characters are easier to relate to because they're undergoing similar experiences that aren't as uncommon as we'd like to believe. I think the film messes with your head because De Niro's portrayal of Pupkin is so void and unlikable. I like to think that, that in turn allows for a lot of people to see the same ugliness in themselves, which is exactly where the tone or the theme of the film begins to flourish, you know?
Well, we can get back to talking about more of the King of Comedy later, but we also have plenty of other campy entertainment for you nocturnal creatures out there, tuning in at this very moment.
You're listening to the Ghost of Hollywood here on KBOO 90.7 FM Portland. Stay tuned because when we return...
My first guest, you'll agree with me that he's destined for greatness in one way or another. So will you please give your warmest greetings to the newest King of Comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
Welcome back to the Ghost of Hollywood on KBOO 90.7 FM Portland. I'm your host, Poxy Leonard, here with Miss Ragan, and the time has come for tonight's segment of the Capsule Review.
That it has, Poxy. Tonight we have chosen quite a significant film from the vault, and that is no other than the Martin Scorsese 1983 The King of Comedy, starring Robert De Niro, Sandra Bernhard, and Jerry Lewis.
And for those of you out there tuning in tonight who haven't yet undergone the mind-bending experience viewing The King of Comedy, let me lay down the synopsis so that Reagan and I are able to put things into perspective.
What you got, Poxy?
Okay, here goes nothing. The King of Comedy tells the story of a man named Rupert Pupkin, who lives in his mother's basement where he spends most of his time honing his comedic stand-up skills, which he attempts to sell to a big-time television host a la the Johnny Carson type of character named Jerry Langford, in hopes of getting some type of airtime on Langford's late-night talk show.
But there is a problem. Rupert is extremely delusional, and his misguided self-view begins to bleed through every crack within the first few minutes of the film, during his abrupt encounter with Langford.
And then there's Masha, who is another crazed fan, albeit adding her own signature style to the mental distortions. She shows up in the beginning too, bombarding Jerry Langford as he attempts to get into his limo outside of the studio.
I had to reevaluate the beginning after watching the film because I hardly even noticed it's Masha who jumps inside of the taxi.
What, you thought it was some rando in like a one-off scene?
I guess I just didn't catch a good look at her face, so when I was better acquainted with her character later on, I was like, oh yeah, that's the hysterical lady in the taxi at the beginning.
Alright, well, for those of you who are Scorsese fans, or maybe you just harbor an appreciation for the King of Comedy, hopefully we're able to do the film some justice for you tonight. Now, as we were discussing earlier, The King of Comedy is an exceptional film for various reasons. Many of the scenes are shot much like a television show would be. The psychological ills are at play, and they leave the viewer in a state of intrepid, egocentric self-doubt. And most important of all, the film misses the mark at the box office, and it went largely overlooked, but eventually it became known as the cult classic it is today.
I don't think we can box it in as a cult classic. It's too big for that. And it's interesting to read about how everything came together as the film began production during the early 1980s. So I'm anxious to talk about that with you.
Well, let's start with the script then, which leads us to Paul Zimmerman, who wrote the screenplay for The King of Comedy. Zimmerman had previously worked for Newsweek as a film critic until 1975, and was also busy writing screenplays at the time. But it's worth noting that The King of Comedy was a big hit for him personally, making him the first winner of a BAFTA award for Best Original Screenplay.
Zimmerman sounds like a fairly eccentric person, and maybe I'm wrong, but anyone who joins a Republican convention specifically to vote against Reagan on the nuclear freeze movement definitely fits that category. Anyway, I believe De Niro got the script from Zimmerman in the early to mid-70s, while Zimmerman was still working for Newsweek. As many people know, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't know as well, the old story goes that when De Niro approached Scorsese about the project, he passed on it.
That's true, and this happened prior to their work together on Taxi Driver. So at some point down the road after Scorsese starts hitting some rough patches with films like Raging Bull and New York, New York...
You know, well, first, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Well, it's strange to think of a film like Raging Bull ever having been considered anything less than spectacular work. I know there are some effective counterpoints that can be made here, but it's still odd to think of it as a failure.
Understandable. Still though, The King of Comedy didn't do much to prop up Scorsese's career at the time, which seems to be something that he carries with him until, I'd say, After Hours. In the interviews after talking about his work on that film, he mentions that he sort of feels out of the loop with the industry at the time, and that he made it a goal to find a place for himself there as he continued to, pursue his career path.
Okay, back to Zimmerman for a moment. You know, Poxy, we never spend too much time focusing on the screenwriters, but Paul Zimmerman is unique that he actually made some rounds promoting the film during the time of its release. So I found this clip of an appearance on Letterman back during March of '83, where Zimmerman takes a stab at stand-up himself and discusses his work on the screenplay and other involvement in the film.
All right, let's have a listen then. Roll the clip.
Hi there. Welcome to the program. If you've seen a motion picture called The King of Comedy, it deals with a gentleman whose only desire in life is to perform stand-up comedy on a late-night talk show. Tonight, on this program, we have the gentleman who wrote the screenplay. His name is Paul Zimmerman. And for the first time anywhere in America, anywhere in North America, Mr. Zimmerman is going to get a chance to perform stand-up comedy. And this is a first for him and for us. Please welcome now the man who wrote the motion picture, The King of Comedy, Paul Zimmerman.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the applause, but I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what is this ding-dong doing on national television? I don't blame you. I mean, you people have certain standards for what you watch on television, and I want to tell you up front, I'm not going to be able to meet them. Sorry. For one thing, I do not have hemorrhoids. I know that's a popular show business gambit. You get hemorrhoids, you go national with them, coast to coast. Paul Zimmerman of Upper Makefield talks about his hemorrhoids. But I have no hemorrhoids to talk about. In fact, I don't lack confidence in my laxative. I have no disgusting personal habits to share with you. I'm sorry if you're disappointed in that, but you're thinking then maybe, just maybe, he's a deviant. He's one of those perverts. They play all the talk shows, and why not? It takes no special talent. All you have to do is reach out and touch someone. I think it's sort of peculiar, don't you, that the phone company is encouraging that kind of behavior? That doesn't happen to be my case. I did call the Donahue show a couple of weeks ago. I said, how would you like the screenwriter of The King of Comedy on your show? And they said, fine, but we want to dress it up a little. We need a grabber, something a little special, you know? And I said, okay, anything you want. And they said, fine, you're going to undergo a sex change operation. We've never had a transsexual screenwriter on our show. And I said, that's a little much to ask for, to promote a movie. But then this happens to writers all the time. And I'm a team player. But that was before I found out what they do to you. Do you know what they do to you in those operations? Do you know? they chop your beard off. They chop it right off. And it doesn't grow back. Don't let them tell you it grows back, because it doesn't. Once it's gone, that's it. And I thought, hey, I'm not ready to make that kind of commitment. After all, who ever heard of a screenwriter without a beard? So, where's the laugh machine? I was told there was going to be a laugh machine. At any rate, you're thinking, no disgusting personal habits. They've already had somebody balance something on his face. He's not a deviant. Maybe he betrayed his country. That's a popular way of getting on TV. Look at Watergate. That wasn't a break-in. That was the launching of a whole entertainment industry. Yeah. Television shows, movies, television shows. Did you read where Richard Nixon is getting his own series on cable? How many of you have heard about that? I'm not kidding. Oh, you think that's terrific, huh? Actually, they taped the first show, and I hear it's very revealing, except somebody erased the first 18 and a half minutes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It wasn't me, but I thought, if those guys can get on television, why not me? I'm a writer. I paid my dues. 18 years I've been at it. Only reason you haven't heard of me before this is I wouldn't sell out. No, I would not sell out. Not until now, anyway. I went to work for Disney. Frosty the Snowman? Anybody here? You've heard of him. You don't know my Frosty. Frosty in a Big Rain? Frosty and the Angry Snow Shovel? You know those? Frosty Goes to Miami? They said that's much too depressing. I said, well, I'm not going to change it. So I sat down, I came up with something else, a reindeer named Rudolph. Yes, I am the creator of Rudolph the Hard-Nosed Reindeer. Of Rudolph the Hard-Nosed Reindeer. He's a very tough customer. He still has that enormous electronic deformity at the end of his face. And the reindeer, they tease him. He still has, the reindeer, they tease him, they cut him out, they beat him up, You're my kind of crowd, nice and bloodthirsty. So, when Santa comes along, he thinks, see if you can make it too good. When Santa comes along, he thinks, he's asking favors. He thinks, where was this guy when they were beating my brains out? Suddenly he wants me to be a pilot. So he says, okay. Takes him up 30,000 feet, right into some bad weather, shuts off the old schnoz, peels out. So long, guys. You're on your own. They're still somewhere over Siberia, those reindeer, looking for a place to land. They say, no good. Who's going to deliver the presents? I said, I don't care. I'm 44 years old. I'm not getting any presents. They said, no. So I went back. I came up with one last character, an extraterrestrial who's cut off. That's right. I wrote the first version of E.T. He comes into the little California town, except in my version, they don't help him. They eat him. You like that too. Good. They point him right to the microwave. They say, there's your little spaceship. So long. He winds up tasting. Please. Noah. In a minute. There'll be a break in a minute. He tastes a little like Snapping Turtle, as a matter of fact. Tastes a little like Snapping Turtle. Anyway, I'm glad I held out. The King of Comedy's been made. I called up the Letterman show. I said, how would you like to have me on? They said, yeah, but we want to dress it up a little bit. I said, look, dress it up all you want, just don't chop it off. They said, okay. They said, we're just going to ask you to do a little stand-up comedy. And I said, I've never done that before in my life. But then I thought, how else am I going to get any recognition? None of you's ever seen a live screenwriter before, have you? Anybody here seen a living, breathing screenwriter? Well, there are a few of you. You're supposed to say no. Well, I figure, I'll go ahead with it. People will know who wrote the movie. I figure, what do I have to lose? Better king for a night than for a lifetime.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This, of course, is Paul Zimmerman, the man who wrote the terribly successful motion picture, The King of Comedy. And you've never done stand-up comedy before?
Never in my life, and you can see why.
Now, did you enjoy that experience?
Well, I feel a little like Carol Chessman. It's like sitting in the... It's really very tough. The one thing that you don't know is how to deal with an audience. As a writer, you can write a routine.
That's right.
But then there's a living, breathing crowd. They are living and breathing, aren't they?
This is a fine audience. Don't turn on this audience. Now, how long did it take you to prepare the act?
2.5 weeks, 24 hours a day.
Yeah. And did you try it out on an audience before you did this?
Yes, I did, and about half the stuff was thrown out, and that's the stuff I used.
Now which audience? Who was the audience?
There was a premiere, a local premiere for the King of Comedy, and people came, and then we had a reception afterwards, and I did it in front of 300 people, and it was okay, and I improved it. That was the improved version, if you can believe it. You can imagine what those three all wanted their money back.
Now, you in the screenplay, you had to write De Niro's stand-up.
Yeah, but that's for another character. That's the best monologue I could write for somebody who's strange, really strange, even stranger than I am, if that's possible to believe. And I wrote that in 1973.
The whole screenplay you wrote.
Yeah.
Now, is there much of you in the character of Rupert?
Yeah, a lot is and a lot isn't, yeah.
Now, has this been a burning desire for you to do stand-up comedy on TV for a while? Used to be, yeah.
Just burned out. It's funny how fast that can happen.
And what have you learned from this experience, Paul?
Never to do it again, David. I'm glad I don't have to do this for a living, and you have my condolences.
Now, don't be discouraged by that reaction. It was very gallant and noble of you to give it a shot, and I appreciate you coming on the show. So.
Thank you.
Paul Zimmerman, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Ghost of Hollywood, right here on KBOO 90.7 FM Portland, and streaming all around the world at KBOO.FM. I'm your host, Poxy Leonard, here with Miss Ragan, and what you were just listening to is a clip that was taken from a 1983 appearance by Paul Zimmerman on The David Letterman Show. Zimmerman, at the time, was promoting his screenplay, The King of Comedy, which had been developed into what is now considered one of the finest Martin Scorsese films.
He didn't do too bad. Some of it was a little dated for sure, but I was down with the whole idea of eating E.T.
Alright, well, I think we finally answered the long-ass question of who killed E.T.
Paul Zimmerman killed that.
What, you're not gonna say it?
It just doesn't roll with my style.
Alright, I'll cover for you here. Listen up, Nightcrawlers. Reagan and I will be back with more on 1983's hidden gem, The King of Comedy. But in light of the moment, I'm feeling compelled to spin one of my favorite records for you. You are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood, brought to you especially by KBOO Community Radio on 90.7 FM and Electric Garden Studio in Portland, Oregon. The Ghost of Hollywood is also available on all streaming platforms, so please like and subscribe to keep the show moving as we gear up for our second season this coming fall.
And if you still can't get enough, follow us on Instagram or check us out on KBOO.FM for all of the latest information and updates on the show. You can also tune in live on KBOO.FM bi-weekly from 3 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. to catch us on the air in real time.
Stay tuned because you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood, live from the Electric Garden Studio in Portland, Oregon. Now, before the break, Ray and I were talking about Martin Scorsese's 1983 film, The King of Comedy.
Well, we left off with an interview between Paul Zimmerman and David Letterman that took place around the time that King of Comedy was released. Paul Zimmerman wrote The King of Comedy in the early 70s, although it's now known that Scorsese improved the end of the screenplay and also developed a thematic approach that would darken the tone of the film overall.
You know, Zimmerman developed the idea for the story after learning about autograph hunters, and particularly a story of some crazed Johnny Carson fan that appeared in Esquire. Anyway, speaking of Johnny Carson, he turned down the role of Jerry Langford when he was offered it. But Jerry Lewis actually sought some advice from him about the part after it was cast.
Well, we have some old Hollywood name fame to navigate through here tonight. And even some of your friends show up in the background during a scene or two, Poxy.
Oh yeah, I always forget that most of the Clash are in the background while Sandra Bernhard is losing her shit on the sidewalk. Don Letts is in the film too. I guess, I'll have to bring up After Hours again here for a second, because the club scene in that film with all of the punks hanging around while Bad Brains is on the stereo is dope. I mean, Scorsese knew what was up. Come on, it's the same guy who brought Travis Bickle to the screen.
This is true, but the light shines through the King of Comedy on the more unsuspecting people involved in the film. One of them is Sandra Bernhard, who plays the part of the obsessive fan, Masha. Prior to the King of Comedy, Bernhard hadn't really seen any screen time, making an appearance at Night Streams and performing regularly at the Comedy Store as a stand-up act.
And I won't go too deep here, but her first film was actually working voiceovers in that badass sword fighting movie, Shogun Assassin, which was reworked from scenes taken out of the Lone Wolf and Cub movies. So, the King of Comedy really did turn the tide for her, though. She scored an award for Best Supporting Actress by National Film Society critics for it.
She is intense, though. The energy she brings to the table really helped catalyze my interest in watching the film. I was able to scrounge up a clip of Sandra Bernhard talking about some of her experiences during the production of The King of Comedy. She also answered some questions about the Comedy Store and how she was cast in The King of Comedy.
All right, let's roll that clip.
Physical comedy, and at the end when he hits me and he's supposed to knock me out, originally he wanted me in my bra and panties and high heels to do a free fall into a large glass parsons table lit with 100 candles. And I just said, I can't. He goes, you can. And he kept trying to show me how, he was going to do it and how I would spin around and fall into it and everything would be fine. But in the end, I ended up just standing against a wall and he hits me and I just slide down and I fall onto a mattress. Because I am not that kind of physical comic. I also don't want to end up on Percodan for the rest of my life from all the injuries that, he had. So,
have you ever experienced anything similar to the King of Comedy with crazed fans in real life?
The only time I really came close to that is when I hung out with some other, infamous people who collect those kinds of fans. But on my own, people have always been pretty cool. I think they respect my space. I think they're a little intimidated by me. I like to keep it that way. Diane Cannon came in. She was always fun and crazy. Jacqueline Smith from Charlie's Angels. She was a terrible tipper. Victoria Principal, I was just in awe because she was so gorgeous. One person, I'm going to blank on her name right now, she played Golda Meir on Broadway, which that actress, somebody knows. Tova Feldship. Tova was she was a little bit, condescending. How's your little career going? And I'm now I run into her and she's I'm always delightful to her though, because I have a lot of Brahmanas. You learn from people. You learn what not to do. You learn how not to be from when people are not particularly, supportive or understanding. And it's a trip, and it's great. You evolve through your learning process.
How did you come across the Comedy Store in L.A.? Why do you think they hired you, and what do you attribute that made you a popular staple there?
Well, they never hired anybody there, first of all. I mean, you just perform for free. Until we actually went on strike in the late 70s. No, it's true. It was, and I remember everybody was in the line. David Letterman, Jay Leno, people who now are, superstars. We all picketed the Comedy Store because they did not pay us anything. So eventually they started giving us a stipend, $25, $50. And then they opened up a room just for women comedians called the Belly Room. So I was at first a staple of the Belly Room. It was a very small, just a quarter of this room here. And but it gave me a lot of confidence because they came to see women in comedy, and it wasn't like you were compared against men, because then when you go downstairs to the bigger rooms and you got up and the men had been performing all night, they were used to a different speed and intensity, and I just did something very different. So it was a launching pad, and it was a place to to work out your kinks.
How did you land your first role in Marty Scorsese's film, The King of Comedy?
Well, actually a friend of mine who had auditioned for the role, my friend Lucy Webb, had recommended me to Sis Corman, who cast the film. They'd seen everybody, I think even Meryl Streep had auditioned for the role. And I came in kind of late in the game. They'd seen like at least 500 actresses. And so I went in and auditioned for Sis Corman, and she was totally blown away. It was very similar to what I did in the film. And, you know, I was crazy and full of like this, you know, hyper energy that I had when I was 24, 25 years old. And then she set up the next audition for Scorsese and De Niro. Then they came to see me perform at the Comedy Store. Richard Belzer actually came and did like a little improv with me so that they could see me, because that's what the film was about. They wanted somebody who could do improvisation, because so much of the role was improvised. And that kind of convinced them. But then they flew me to New York after that for the third round of auditioning with Jerry Lewis. And that, for me, was the most intimidating. Because, you know, growing up, you know, Jerry Lewis, I mean, he's like this, megawatt legend. And that was the hardest part of the audition, because he was very, like, you know, his character was very detached and very cold. And Jerry has a tendency in that time, especially, of not really feeling particularly supportive of women. I don't think he ever thought women were funny. I think he actually made that statement, along with Christopher Hitchens. I don't know if you read that article in Vanity Fair, but he declared that women are not funny, but he did give me a special dispensation.
Welcome back to the Ghost of Hollywood on KBOO 90.7 FM. If you're just tuning in, what you heard was a Q&A session with Sandra Bernhard discussing her early career and breakthrough role as Masha in the 1983 film The King of Comedy. You know, Ray, I thought it was kind of unsettling that she mentioned Jerry Lewis not thinking that women were funny.
Yeah, me too, because after Dean Martin left, Jerry Lewis was never funny again. I only think he does so well in The King of Comedy because he was such a prude, especially as he grew older.
Oh yeah, for every positive that Lewis had in his life, there can be something equally negative to say about him. You know, definitely a complicated person regardless of your point of view on him. And I feel like at some point in his career, he was just, you know, trying a little bit hard. I mean, you know, despite the critics, a lot of his films are cringeworthy in a way. And, you know, in The King of Comedy, he does the part so well, and he's so cold that you almost feel indifferent to the character of Jerry Langford.
At some point, I think it crosses everyone's mind who has watched the film that maybe giving Pupkin a shot would just be easier for Jerry. His reluctance almost carries this gatekeeping feel to it, like he's nervous Pupkin may actually steal the show, or he feels like Pupkin should have to pull his time too.
That's it, right there. I think Jerry Lewis really did feel that way a lot in life. I mean, maybe not particularly with De Niro and The King of Comedy, but just overall with the way he dealt with business. At some point, funny became business, and the vibe he put off just wasn't funny anymore. I mean, the follow-up to King of Comedy with Slapstick really exemplifies just how poorly he was being received as a comedian in the U.S. at the time.
Well, before we beat the dead horse again, let's check out this interview with Jerry Lewis discussing the role he played in The King of Comedy.
Okay, but pay attention here to what Lewis says, and particularly about De Niro having anonymity at the time that the film went into production. You know, De Niro was already really well known for Godfather Part 2, Deer Hunter, and it just finished up with the Robert Duvall, and, you know, in the Robert Duvall, with Robert Duvall in True Confessions by the time The King of Comedy was filmed.
True Confessions, yeah? Definitely sort of a miscast in that, I think.
Yeah, but Burgess Meredith was spot on in that film. I mean, I know he didn't play a big role, but it was a good one nonetheless, and that all sounds weird, but it's just what stood out to me the most watching True Confessions. And another quick side note, the director of Deer Hunter, Michael Cimino, actually passed on The King of Comedy to direct the legendary disaster now known as Heaven's Gate.
Okay, let's roll the clip of Jerry Lewis discussing his work in The King of Comedy. Now, stay with us because I'm going to follow up with another longer interview between he and Brian Linehan on City Lights in 1983. It's a bit more informative, but I feel like this clip is also essential because it really displays the attitude Lewis sometimes carried that was likely a major put-off to fans and critics throughout his career.
All right, well, let's roll the clip.
The King of Comedy was a very unique situation because the script was terrific. And Marty Scorsese called me. I was appearing in Tahoe, and he said, I'm going to send you a script overnight, FedEx. Please read it. I think you're going to find it interesting. And I got it, and I read it, and I called Marty, and I said, it's a wonderful script. It's a wonderful idea. He said, will you do it? I said, yeah, I think I'll do it. It was terrific. I'm in New York 4 weeks later, and we were going to prep. And for the next 8 weeks, Marty and Bobby De Niro and myself met every day, and their questions to me were related to why I have no anonymity and what's it like being a celebrity. Now, Bobby De Niro was sitting here saying to me, what's it like being a celebrity? And I said, what the hell are you talking about? Now, this is 1982. Well, Bobby was known for Bang the Drum Slowly, and who could remember that face? Taxi Driver, Raging Bull. He has anonymity. He doesn't know what it is to be a celebrity at that time. And I proceed to tell them things that we incorporated in the script. And it was a wonderful experience to watch the stuff take place. And I was giving them the benefit of some, at that time, some 50 years of experience.
Okay, let's go ahead and roll the second clip. This is an interview I mentioned just moments ago, which took place on the show City Lights with Ryan Linehan and Jerry Lewis in 1983, where the two discussed the King of Comedy in a little more depth.
That's it. I'd love to have you think it's great acting, but all I had to do was react to Robert De Niro's creation of Rupert Pupkin. Mm-hmm. When I sit there and have Laurence Olivier's biography open after having read yours, and Lord Olivier maintains that great acting is reacting, it's listening. Can we qualify what seems to be your minimization of reacting and listening?
If Lord Olivier said that, he probably knows what he's talking about, and if I said the other, I probably don't. I like what he said.
I gotcha.
Okay.
I just think that so many extraordinary things, I know so many extraordinary things were going on the set with you, Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, and company. I mean, you went off for 2 days to Winston-Salem, North Carolina to play golf, and while you were gone, Robert De Niro said, I want to watch exactly like Jerry's.
No, he wanted mine.
He wanted your own watch?
Yes.
Did you give it to him?
Yeah, he would not do the scene unless he was wearing my watch. And we had to send to New York, have my driver drive it out in a limo from New York to the location, which was a couple hours away. And until I got security to open the suite at the hotel, calling from North Carolina, that watch got to Bobby around 4 o'clock that afternoon. The scene was only a 2-line scene in the whole picture. He was wearing a jacket and a shirt, but he wanted to wear that watch, which helped him. He was supposed to emulate me, the character in the film. That helped him. Now, you want to call that eccentric, cuckoo, nuts, bonkers? I say that's the stuff that gets Raging Bull on the screen. And no one will ever dispute it with an artist like Bobby. I won't. If I heard the story, I would say, well, that's nuts. Come on, I've directed actors before, and I've seen how they work and so on. When I watched this whole process, I repeat, whatever Bobby De Niro does to get that kind of performance on the screen, don't tell me he's bonkers. He knows what he's doing.
As an artist who can not only be referred to as the total filmmaker, but published a volume as the total filmmaker and can lecture at universities the way you do. You are the disciplinarian. You are on the set. When you find yourself on a set with Martin Scorsese and there seems to be ostensibly a lack of discipline because it's 8 o'clock in the morning and Jerry's not only on time, he's early, and the crew is chuckling.
Because Marty didn't show up until 1:30 or 2 o'clock that afternoon. It was mind-boggling the first few days. I just had never seen that kind of sloppy discipline. It wasn't sloppy at all. It was all by design. And I think Bobby De Niro's performance is on that screen again.
When I'm aware that Martin Scorsese can say, I was a Jerry Lewis fan before this began, Jerry Lewis was helpful not only as an actor, he was helpful as the total filmmaker. When you turn to Robert De Niro and you say before a scene, your timing's too good. Right. Rupert Pupkin isn't that good.
Right.
And you teach Robert De Niro how to be less good?
It was tough. It's tough to teach someone how to time poorly. But Bobby learns his craft and learns what he has to do. And in this case, he learned it just a hair too well. And he was just too slick. And then Marty came to me and asked me to help Bobby be less than slick. And that's tough.
I would assume that the slickness came from those days and weeks that Robert De Niro spent in a screening room studying clinically all of your films. When you could do a visual gag to Robert De Niro on the set, and he could name the movie, the scene that preceded it, and what was about to happen. Wasn't it just a little alarming to think, is this man going to do all 48 of my movies, including Smorgasbord and Slapstick, while I'm here?
It's a little alarming when you're looking at one of the greatest actors that ever lived, who could easily be referred to as the largest fan you have in the world. That's disarming and alarming and mind-boggling and very, very humbling.
When your director, Martin Scorsese, sends you out onto the street in New York, and Jerry Lewis and Jerry Langford somehow cinematically become one, and we see this reaction, there's an extraordinary sense of there's a movie happening within a movie, and there's a man playing the most famous television person in the world, and this famous man in the world walking down the street. And I had the feeling that Scorsese had sent you out on a mission of cinema verite, and Jerry Lewis was being challenged to get down that street while they were doing a tracking shot. Wasn't there an incident of a little old lady who came out and did what can only be described as a triple take, knowing it was Jerry Lewis, and finally an assistant director came out and got her out of the shot?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she walked about 40 feet with me. She just couldn't believe it. You are really... And I want her to know there's a truck right there with camera and crew, and I couldn't get it out. I don't believe that are you telling me that you're him and I'm walking? And she went some 40 feet with me, and we've got all that footage. And I had to keep going because we had a second camera at the end of this setup, and I had to meet that. So I'm trying to get as far around as I can and shake her, hoping they're going to zoom a little tighter to lose her. We have her. She's full in. She ain't in a movie, but she's in that piece. Then, of course, I'm walking down the street, and all the construction workers yelling, "Hey, Jerry!" And it all works. Marty and I talked about if there was going to be so much street stuff in New York, let's call the character Jerry. Now, there's one marvelous moment in the film where I'm standing totally alone at 65th and Madison, and this lady walked up, and she looked at me, and she's looking at the traffic lights, and she looked at me again, and looked at the traffic light, and then she leaned forward and said, "Jerry Lewis, son of a gun." If she'd have just said Jerry, son of a gun, we'd have had it, and we'd have kept it. But she put the name together. And I looked at her, I said, "Son of a bitch," and we cut. It would have been super if she'd have just said Jerry. Every time I got screwed up.
Well, Jerry Langford is not based on any one individual. You did have what you described as a casual conversation with Johnny Carson. There was one description where Jerry Langford might be a combination of Johnny Carson and Walter Cronkite, where his flippancy is never sacrificed for his trustworthiness and or dependability to his audience. When we sit there and we watch this and realize what really is happening in the world, how we see the underside of celebrity, what really happens with celebrity, being wheeled into surgery, being asked by Helen for your autograph. There's a sense of being so frightened. The movie terrifies in one aspect. While you're being entertained and you're looking and listening and learning, you're frightened. It frightened me that way.
Because it's real. It's real, it's honest, it's out there. You have to be aware of it. The word fanatic is a frightening word. Well, what's the first three letters?
Fan.
That's it. That's the name of the tune.
Scratch a fan. When you were having one of the confrontation scenes with Robert De Niro, and in that unique improvisational way, racial slurs, epithets were being thrown at you. You were both building into the scene. You said it was frightening when you did it, but when you saw it on the screen, it was doubly frightening. Why doubly when you saw the result?
Well, because I'm performing something I've never performed before in that intensity kind of a performance. Now to see the character or to see myself, because I had no mask or no disguise that I'm used to seeing the silly Jerry hide behind. It was doubly frightening because I was watching myself play a real life moment in my life. The insipid idiocy of the fan is the fanatic, and watching myself portray myself, celebrity, quote, end quote, being annoyed and literally harassed by that maniac. It's frightening. I've never been able to look from the outside in when I'm being harassed. And you're not interested in looking from the outside in when you're being loved, because you don't particularly care about seeing that. The joy of it happening is all you need.
We're back here on The Ghost of Hollywood, talking about the film, The King of Comedy. That last clip was taken from a 1983 interview with Jerry Lewis on City Lights, discussing his experience working on The King of Comedy. Interesting fact, Ragan. Did you know that Jerry Lewis had a pretty well-publicized story in the early 90s where a chronic schizophrenic named Gary Benson was sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison for stalking Lewis and his family?
I did, but I have something I read about that's definitely worth bringing to light here. Teresa Saldana, who appeared in Raging Bull, was actually stabbed multiple times by a fan at her home in 1982. The creep was able to get her address after calling her mother, but get this.
I'm listening.
When he calls her mother, his reason for needing the address is because he claims to be an assistant of, and this is where it gets strange, mind you, Martin Scorsese. And he says he has been attempting to contact her about a film in Europe.
Well, that's intense. I really had no idea that this had happened. Did she die?
No, but she passed away in 2016 at 61 after suffering from pneumonia. Anyway, let's move on to talk about De Niro's role as Rupert Pupkin. So I've already gone over the fact that Bob brought the script to Scorsese, and in the interview with Jerry Lewis, we learned a lot about the various things and odd things De Niro did to prepare for the role.
I guess that covers it then. Next.
Hold on for a second. I don't think the scene where he and Christopher Walken are forced to play Russian roulette in Deer Hunter can ever be topped, but his entire performance in The King of Comedy is wild. It's so on point at the entry of the movie that you immediately fall for him, and all the stuff that he did to prepare for the film is very intriguing.
It is pretty impressive to learn about how well prepared De Niro was for his roles then. Weight gain and loss, notably in Raging Bull, learning baseball, boxing, stand-up, you name it.
Makes you wonder what his approach was for Cape Fear.
Ooh, watch the bodies pile up.
You're killing me, Pac.
What's up, wall crawlers? Can't get enough of The Ghost of Hollywood? Then check out our website at theghostofhollywoodpodcast.com for complete access to our entire first season, featuring movies such as also been pushed ahead because of a looming director's strike, which I don't have the time to accurately cover here, but is worth reading about. And there was a ton of grueling camera work that had to be shot guerrilla style for the film in New York City.
So production was moved to New York City because there was hope that Scorsese would be comfortable working there and a smaller crew would be accessible for filming. He apparently felt the same shockwaves of disturbance filming the movie as most people experienced viewing it. So I'm guessing the entire project wasn't exactly a great deal of fun for him.
Well, let's listen to an interview with Martin Scorsese that took place in, well, you're gonna guess the year, 1983. In it, he discusses how stressful making The King of Comedy really was for him at the time. So, here we go, let's roll the clip.
Now, shooting in New York for King of Comedy was difficult. As you can see, we're going through now traffic. Imagine trying to move an entire company and shooting in the hot summer. And people like human waves coming at you. It was like fighting in Korea, you know.
But it's not what you prefer shooting in New York, because...
Well, I prefer because I prefer the city. But and the next film I make, hopefully, will be The Last Temptation of Christ, and that can't be shot in New York. See, I mean, it's the worst thing you can imagine, shooting a movie. The worst. But there's always that one moment when some magic happens. So I gamble everything for the one moment. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. And at this rate, we're never going to get to the airport on time to make my plane. We're also headed in the wrong direction, aren't we?
Oh, Martin Scorsese, man. Well, we've beaten up on Jerry Lewis a bit here tonight. That said, there's definitely credit that needs to be given where it's due. Lewis was obviously a pro at timing, and he knew the ropes of comedy, even if he liked to pat himself on the back a bit much, and he also was, had the combative manner in interviews and things of that nature. But in The King of Comedy, he was really willing to go along with a lot of De Niro's antics and acting methods and stuff. De Niro threw some pretty harsh stuff at him, and a lot of it was intense, throughout the course of making the film. So
He also directed the famous scene in The King of Comedy where the woman wishes cancer on him after he refuses to talk on the payphone while he's walking past her. I've read this experience was largely true, and Scorsese had Lewis take the lead on the scene.
Oh, that's a great scene. Let's play it really quickly. I know we don't air scenes much because, well, no one can see them, so the purpose is kind of lost. But the dialogue here will more than get the point across. So let's check it out.
Morris, you will not believe who's coming down the hill. Jerry Langford, right?
Right.
Oh, Morris, please hold on. Jerry, would you please sign my order for Self-Signing magazine for me?
Yeah.
You're just wonderful. I've watched you your entire career. You're a joy to the world. Please, Morris, would you just please say something to my nephew Morris on the phone? He's in the hospital.
I'm sorry, I'm late.
You should only get cancer. I hope you get cancer. Jerry, you ever see such a person?
I can't, I'm late.
Believe that kind of a
There's a ton of improvisation done in the film, which Bernhard talked about briefly earlier during the Q&A that we aired when she mentioned Lewis wanting her to perform some crazy pratfall through a candle-covered glass table at the end of the film.
And of course, series fans of Scorsese films are well aware that he always involved his parents in his films while they were alive. In The King of Comedy, his father doesn't play a significant part, but his mother voices Pupkin's mother when she interrupts his delusional performance in the basement of their home.
Well, I remember the first time you saw the film and the cross-cutting of the delusion threw you for an absolute loop.
I'll admit, it got me. I definitely settled into the idea of Pupkin being mentally unhealthy, right in sync with the pace set by the film.
Well, what gets me in the basement, in the basement, what gets me are the basement scenes, and they're just like these really elaborate displays that augment your understanding of Pupkin's mental state. I mean, the cutouts of Jerry Lewis and Liza Minnelli, those big crowd cutouts and photos, it's just incredibly effective.
We don't need to jump off into film theory here, but it's worth noting that Scorsese drew some stylistic influence from the 1903 silent short, The Life of a Fireman.
I watched that short, which is available on YouTube for free, by the way. Just search 1903, Life of a Fireman. It's 6 minutes long, so it'll take less time to watch than it would browsing social media on the toilet.
Gets one thinking about the bathroom book industry.
That's a demise we never even noticed. I used to read some odd golf fact book that sat on the back of my grandma's toilet when I dropped trowel in her bathroom as a kid.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to follow up here.
All right. Well, we're getting off base. Anyway, so back to The Life of the Fireman, right? Life of a Fireman. Let me correct myself. It's worth watching regardless of your interest in The King of Comedy, simply because of the style of editing that developed from the production of that film. There's plenty of conflicting ideas behind the film, its editing, and so on, but it's still a quick piece of cinema knowledge to effortlessly obtain, in my opinion.
I'm sure I missed something, but I really think that Scorsese took influence in scenes using traditional Irish shots and some of the silent film camera styles. The introduction of the film where the credits run over the still shot of the hand on the limousine window seems to indicate that Scorsese intended to face the camera work and style of the film in a new direction for himself in cinema.
I think all that makes sense, But now, while there's plenty more that we could cover on The King of Comedy, time is never on our side, But I did want to talk a little more about the score and the reception the film received when it came out.
Shoot.
Okay, so Robbie Robertson of the infamous musical group The Band developed the score for The King of Comedy. And while he has done plenty of work that we won't divulge much into here, The King of Comedy wasn't his first nor his last collaboration with Scorsese.
That's true. They first worked together on The Last Waltz in '78 and have collaborated very recently on the score of Scorsese's latest film, The Irishman. But what makes the soundtrack to The King of Comedy unique is that the concoction of classical and contemporary music that would become a staple, actually, for his work in subsequent film scores.
Were you surprised that The King of Comedy flopped upon its release?
Considering what it may have been surrounding circumstances at the time, I'm still pulling from a mixed bag.
Well, maybe the world wasn't ready for it yet. Sometimes I think it still isn't in some ways. But there is no doubt that the film itself is phenomenal, and that it addresses some of the issues of mental health, stalking, and fame, all with an outside view that really allows the viewer to develop their own thoughts and opinions about situations like the one portrayed between Masha, Rupert, and Jerry. Well, when we went over a few of them earlier, but there have obviously been several true stories of this sort of, that have an awful ending for everyone involved.
More than anything, it really exploits the cruelty of fame from all sides. In some sense, it really makes you sort of paranoid about such a state of being. But The King of Comedy is able to bring all to life without extreme violence or overcompensation. It gives you the evidence and leaves you to decide.
Well, do you think Pupkin really achieved fame at the end, or that he was crazy?
In the words of Orson Welles, details. If you want a happy ending, that depends, of course, on where you stop the story.
Well, he also said that when you're down and out, something always turns up, and it usually is the noses of your friends.
That'll wrap up another segment of the Capsule Review, discussing the 1983 film, The King of Comedies. I'm Miss Ragan here with Poxy Leonard, and you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood on KBOO 90.7 FM.
You are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood, brought to you especially by KBOO Community Radio on 90.7 FM and Electric Garden Studio in Portland, Oregon. The Ghost of Hollywood is also available on all streaming platforms, so please like and subscribe to keep the show moving as we gear up for our second season this coming fall.
And if you still can't get enough, follow us on Instagram or check us out on KBOO.FM for all of the latest information and updates on the show. You can also tune in live on KBOO.FM bi-weekly from 3 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. to catch us on the air in real time.
Stay tuned because you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood, live from the Electric Garden Studio in Portland, Oregon. Never had nothing, and you are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood on KBOO 90.7 FM Portland.
And the time has come to say goodbye. And Poxy and I have to go get to our coffin before the sun rises.
Whatever, it's almost December. Ain't no sunlight to be found anywhere around here for a while.
It'll be okay, Poxy. Maybe I'll just get you a little sad light for a present this year.
Hey, all I want is a nap, alright?
Go run, old man.
Well, that about wraps things up here. I'm your host, Poxy Leonard, with Miss Ragan, and we will return in 2 weeks with another brand new episode of The Ghost of Hollywood on December 11th.
The Ghost of Hollywood is recorded at the Electric Garden Studio and broadcast live at KBOO Community Radio in Portland, Oregon. Direction provided by Zach Flannery. Writing and program development by Chris Klon, Reagan Flannery, and Zach Flannery. Samples developed by Jesse Garcia. Performances by Reagan Flannery and Zach Flannery. Coordination and communication by Mary Flannery.
For more information on The Ghost of Hollywood, please visit theghostofhollywoodpodcast.com. Copyright held by The Ghost of Hollywood in Electric Garden Studios in Portland, Oregon.